My son took $1.2 million from me while I was helpless in this nursing home. Every penny I had saved, every dollar I had earned teaching mathematics for 40 years, gone. I trusted Rhett completely. When my first stroke left me weak and confused, he offered to handle my finances. Such a caring son, I thought. I signed the power of attorney without hesitation, grateful for his help. The bank statements arrived 3 months later. Empty accounts, sold properties, transferred assets. My life's work, erased by the child I had raised and loved unconditionally. He had been planning this for years. I have something to share with all of you. Something important that needs to be said while we are all together as a family. The room fell completely silent. 23 faces turned toward me, expectant and patient. They thought I was about to give a sentimental speech about family love and cherished memories. They were prepared to smile and nod and humor the old woman one last time. I opened the manila envelope and removed the first document. Bank statements from my savings account. The one that had once held $400,000. The one that now showed a balance of $300. I held up the paper so everyone could see the numbers. My voice was clear and steady when I spoke. This is what remains of my life savings. 40 years of teaching. 40 years of careful budgeting and smart investing. Gone. The smiles began to fade. Confusion replaced polite attention. Some family members leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. Rhett's face had gone white. He started to stand, to interrupt, to regain control of the narrative. I held up my hand, and he froze. I pulled out the property records next. The deed transfers for my house and the lake cabin. Both properties sold without my knowledge or consent. Both proceeds diverted to accounts I never authorized. My house on Maple Street, where I raised my children, sold 6 months ago while I was recovering from my stroke. The money vanished into investment accounts that were immediately liquidated. Holden spoke first, his voice barely a whisper. "Grandma, what are you saying?" "I am saying that your father has stolen $1.2 million from me. While I was helpless in a nursing home, he systematically emptied every account I had. He sold my properties and kept the money. He used my life savings to fund his gambling addiction and pay for this house." The room erupted, voices raised in shock and disbelief. Rhett's cousins looked at him with horror. My daughter Hermione, who had flown in from Seattle, stared at her brother with disgust. Rhett found his voice. She is confused. The stroke affected her memory. She does not understand what she is saying. I pulled out the digital recorder and placed it on the coffee table. Then I pressed play. Rhett's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The recording from his last visit to the nursing home. His condescending explanation of why I could not return home. His casual dismissal of my concerns about my finances. His threat to have me declared incompetent if I continued asking questions. The family listened in stunned silence. Some began to cry. Others looked at Rhett with expressions of pure revulsion. But I was not finished. I pulled out photocopies of forged documents, signature cards that showed my name written in Rhett's handwriting, authorization forms I had never seen, never signed, never approved, evidence of systematic fraud spanning over a year. The gambling records were last, printouts from online poker sites and sports betting accounts, tens of thousands of dollars lost every month. My money feeding his addiction while I ate institutional food and slept in a narrow bed. Scarlett tried to defend him. She stood up, her voice shaking. "This is all a misunderstanding." Rhett was managing her finances to protect her. She was getting confused and making bad decisions. I looked at her directly. My voice was ice cold. This house we are sitting in was purchased with my stolen money. Your Mercedes in the driveway was paid for with my savings. Your designer clothes and expensive jewelry were bought with money stolen from a helpless old woman. You knew exactly where the money was coming from. The family began to turn on them. Angry voices, accusations, demands for explanations. Rhett and Scarlett stood in the center of the room, exposed and defenseless. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Holden walked to the front door and opened it. 3 people entered. James Morrison, my lawyer, Detective Patricia Wells, from the Richmond Police Department, and a court officer with legal documents. I had planned this moment for months. The evidence was already filed. The warrants were already signed. The legal machinery was already in motion. Detective Wells read Rhett his rights. He was being arrested for elder financial abuse, fraud, and theft. The charges carried significant prison time. His law license would be suspended immediately. Scarlett screamed. She threw herself at the detective, clawing and crying. She was arrested, too, charged as an accomplice. Her perfectly manicured nails and designer dress looked ridiculous in handcuffs. The family watched in shock as they were led away. The golden couple, the successful lawyer and his beautiful wife, reduced to common criminals caught in their own web of lies. I sat in my wheelchair, watching it all unfold. There was no satisfaction in their downfall, no joy in their punishment, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. Holden knelt beside my chair. Tears streamed down his face. He had suspected something was wrong, but had not known how to help me. He apologized over and over, blaming himself for not acting sooner. I took his hand and squeezed it gently. You are not responsible for your father's choices. You are a good man with a kind heart. Never let his actions change who you are. The house was seized that evening. All assets purchased with my stolen money were frozen pending court proceedings. Rhett and Scarlett's lifestyle of luxury ended as abruptly as it had begun. The legal process took months. Restitution was ordered for the full amount, plus interest and penalties. I recovered most of my money, though some was lost to gambling debts and frivolous spending. I moved to a private assisted living facility, not because I needed the care, but because I wanted the security. My new apartment had a garden view and space for my father's chess set. I played games against myself, but I always knew who would win. Holden visited every week. He brought his artwork and his gentle presence. We talked about everything except his father. Some wounds were too deep for words. Rhett was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Scarlett received 3 years. Their house was sold at auction. Their cars were repossessed. Their country club membership was revoked. Everything they had built on stolen money crumbled to dust. I established a trust fund for victims of elder financial abuse. I also created a scholarship program for disadvantaged students who wanted to become teachers. The money they had stolen from me would now help others build better lives. Some people asked if I felt guilty about destroying my own son, if I regretted sending him to prison, if I wished I had handled things differently. I always gave the same answer. I did not destroy him. He destroyed himself the moment he decided to steal from his own mother. I simply made sure he faced the consequences of his choices. Justice is not about revenge. It is about truth. It is about protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit them. It is about ensuring that actions have consequences, even when those actions are committed by people we love. I kept one thing from the wreckage of their lives: my father's chess set, carved from ebony and ivory. The pieces cast long shadows on my windowsill as the sun set each evening. Some lessons take a lifetime to teach. Some children never learn them at all. But truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep it is buried. And sometimes the best revenge is simply letting justice take its course. The family reunion was Scarlett's idea. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. The annual gathering would be at their house this year, she said. The new house with the grand foyer and marble countertops, the house my money had built. She spoke slowly, as if I were a child who might not understand. The whole family would be there. Rhett's cousins from North Carolina, my daughter Hermione flying in from Seattle. Even my grandson Holden would drive up from his apartment in Richmond. It would be so wonderful to have everyone together, Scarlett said, especially since I probably would not remember much of it anyway. The stroke had affected my memory so badly, she explained with false concern. But the family photos would be lovely keepsakes. I agreed to attend. My voice was soft, grateful. I even asked if Holden could bring his camera. For memories, I told her. She thought I meant nostalgia. I meant evidence. The preparation took weeks. Every detail had to be perfect. Every piece of evidence organized and accessible. I would have one chance to expose the truth, one moment to reclaim my life and my dignity. Sarah helped me compile the documents, bank statements arranged chronologically, property transfer records with highlighted dates, copies of forged signatures next to samples of my real handwriting. The evidence was overwhelming once laid out properly. The recording device was fully charged. I tested it multiple times to ensure clear audio quality. The small digital recorder fit perfectly in my purse, hidden beneath tissues and reading glasses. No one would suspect the frail old woman was documenting everything. I contacted my lawyer, James Morrison, a man I had trusted for 20 years. He had handled my will, my property purchases, my financial planning. He knew my signature, my voice, my wishes better than anyone. James was shocked by what I revealed. He had received calls from Rhett claiming I was developing dementia. Rhett had suggested updating my will to reflect my diminished capacity. James had refused without speaking to me directly. Now he understood why. We scheduled a meeting for the day after the reunion. James would bring a court stenographer and a forensic accountant. We would file criminal charges and civil suits simultaneously. The legal machinery would begin moving the moment I gave the signal. But first, I had to survive the performance. The morning of the reunion, I dressed carefully. My best blue dress, the one I had worn to graduations and award ceremonies. My pearl earrings, a gift from my late husband. I wanted to look dignified, not like the confused old woman they expected. Holden arrived early to drive me to the house. My grandson was 28 now, a struggling artist with kind eyes and gentle hands. He had always been my favorite, though I tried not to show it. He reminded me of his grandfather, thoughtful and sensitive. He helped me into his car, carefully arranging my wheelchair in the trunk. His movements were tender, protective. He had no idea what was about to happen. The drive to Rhett's house took 30 minutes. I sat quietly, watching familiar neighborhoods pass by. These were the streets where I had raised my children, where I had built my life. Now they felt foreign, like visiting a place I had once lived but no longer belonged. The house was impressive, colonial style with white columns and a circular driveway. The landscaping was professional, the lawn perfectly manicured. Everything about it screamed wealth and success, my wealth, my success, stolen and repurposed for their benefit. Cars filled the driveway. Rhett's cousins had already arrived. I recognized their vehicles from previous gatherings. The family was assembling, unknowing witnesses to what would unfold. Holden wheeled me up the ramp to the front door. The accessibility modification was new, installed specifically for my visit. They had thought of everything to maintain their caring facade. Scarlett greeted us at the door. She was beautiful in the way that money could buy. Perfect hair, flawless makeup, designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She bent down to kiss my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. The house was exactly as I had imagined. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, expensive furniture arranged for maximum impact. Every room was a showpiece, a testament to their elevated lifestyle. My lifestyle. Funded by my stolen savings. The family gathered in the living room. 23 people representing 4 generations. Children playing on the floor. Teenagers checking their phones. Adults catching up on work and life and family gossip. I sat in my wheelchair near the fireplace, the matriarch surveying her domain. They brought me tea and cookies, asked about my health, made polite conversation about the weather and current events. No one mentioned money. No one asked about my finances or my future care. The topics that consumed my daily existence were carefully avoided. Rhett played his role perfectly, the devoted son, attentive and caring. He brought me a cushion for my back, adjusted my blanket, made sure I was comfortable. His performance was flawless, honed by months of practice. I watched him work the room, shaking hands with cousins, discussing business ventures, accepting compliments on his beautiful home. He was confident, successful, respected by his family. They had no idea who he really was. Lunch was served on the patio, catered food from an expensive restaurant, served on china that cost more than most people's dinner budget. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. It might be the last meal I would share with this family. The afternoon stretched lazily. Children played in the backyard. Adults lounged in comfortable chairs, enjoying the mild weather. Holden took photographs, capturing moments that would soon be tainted by truth. I waited for the perfect moment, when everyone was relaxed and comfortable, when guards were down and attention was focused, when the maximum number of people would witness what came next. The moment arrived as the sun began to set. The family gathered in the living room for group photos. Traditional poses, smiling faces, the appearance of harmony and love. I asked Holden to position my wheelchair in the center of the room. I wanted to address the family, I said, to thank them for including me in this beautiful celebration. The room fell quiet, not because they were interested in what I had to say, but because they were humoring the old woman, indulging her need to feel important one more time. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope, the one containing bank statements, property records, and legal documents, the evidence of systematic theft and calculated betrayal. I placed it on the coffee table in front of me. My hands were steady, my voice clear. The stroke had not affected my ability to speak truth. The family leaned forward, curious about what their elderly matriarch wanted to share. They expected gratitude, perhaps a sentimental speech about family memories and enduring love. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. I started carrying my old leather notebook everywhere, the one I had used for lesson plans and grade calculations for 40 years. The staff thought I was writing poetry or memoirs. Sweet old lady, documenting her memories before they faded. They had no idea I was building a case. Every conversation with Rhett went into that notebook. Every phone call, every visit, every lie he told me about my finances. I wrote down dates, times, exact words. I documented his explanations and cross-referenced them with the evidence I was slowly gathering. The nursing home had a computer in the common room. Residents could use it to email family or browse the internet. I signed up for time slots when the room was empty. My fingers were slower than they once were, but I still knew how to research. I found my bank's website, created an online account. The balance confirmed my worst fears. $300 remaining in an account that once held over $400,000. The transaction history showed systematic withdrawals, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic alerts. My son was not stupid. He was methodical. I requested copies of all transaction records for the past year. The bank required verification of identity and account ownership. I provided everything they asked for, grateful that my name was still on the accounts, even though Rhett controlled them. The documents arrived by mail 2 weeks later. Page after page of transfers, withdrawals, and account closures. The pattern was clear once I mapped it out on paper. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums, as he tested whether I would notice. The real estate transactions were harder to trace. Property records were public, but I needed help accessing them. That was where my former students became invaluable. Tommy Richardson at First National Bank was my first call. He remembered me immediately. His voice brightened when he heard my name. I had helped him pass calculus his senior year, he said. He never forgot how patient I had been with him. I told him I needed help understanding some property transfers. Nothing illegal, just an old woman trying to make sense of paperwork. He offered to research the transactions for me, as a favor to his favorite teacher. The information he provided was devastating. My house had been sold 6 months ago. The cabin by the lake was gone too. Both properties transferred to a holding company, then immediately sold to third parties. The proceeds never reached my accounts. I called another former student, Sarah Kim, who now worked as a paralegal. She helped me understand the legal documents Rhett had filed. Power of attorney gave him broad authority over my finances, but it did not give him the right to sell my property without my knowledge or consent. What he had done was not just betrayal, it was fraud. I needed evidence of his deception, proof that he had acted against my interests and without my consent. That meant recording our conversations, documenting his lies, and gathering testimony from witnesses. The recording device was Sarah's suggestion, a small digital recorder, easy to hide in my purse or pocket. Legal in Virginia as long as one party to the conversation consented. I was that party. Rhett's next visit gave me my first recording. He sat in my room, eating chocolates he had brought, and explained why I could not return home yet. The house needed too much work, he said. The roof was leaking, the foundation had problems, the electrical system was outdated. All lies. I had maintained that house meticulously. Every repair was documented, every improvement carefully planned and executed. He knew I knew the condition of my own home. But he continued the charade, his voice patient and condescending, as if I were a child who needed simple explanations for complex adult decisions. The recording captured everything. His lies about the house condition, his dismissive attitude about my concerns, his insistence that I was too frail and confused to manage my own affairs. I made copies of everything. The bank records, the property documents, the recordings. I stored them in different locations around my room. One set in my dresser drawer, another in my closet, a third with Sarah for safekeeping. The investigation revealed more than I had expected. Rhett's law practice was struggling. He had made risky investments that failed. His wife's spending habits were excessive. They were living beyond their means and using my money to maintain their lifestyle. My savings had funded their new Mercedes, their country club membership, their designer clothes, and expensive vacations. They had stolen my security to pay for their luxuries. The gambling debts were the worst discovery. Rhett had developed a serious problem with online poker and sports betting. He owed money to people who did not accept payment plans. My inheritance was being used to pay off his gambling losses. Everything I had worked for, everything I had saved for my own care and for my grandchildren's education, was being flushed away to cover his addiction and their extravagant lifestyle. But I kept documenting, kept recording, kept gathering evidence. The nursing home staff began to notice my activities. Nurse Hermione, a kind woman about my daughter's age, asked gentle questions about my research. She had seen me with documents and legal papers. She wondered if I needed help with something. I decided to trust her. Carefully, gradually, I explained what I had discovered. She listened without judgment, her expression growing more serious as I revealed the scope of Rhett's betrayal. Hermione had worked in elder care for 15 years. She had seen financial abuse before. She knew the signs, the patterns, the devastating impact on families. She offered to help however she could. Her assistance proved invaluable. She witnessed conversations between Rhett and his wife when they thought no one was listening. She documented their discussions about my care, their plans for my remaining assets, their casual dismissal of my mental capacity. The picture that emerged was chilling. They were not just stealing from me. They were systematically isolating me, undermining my credibility, and preparing to have me declared incompetent so they could take complete control of my remaining resources. The plan was already in motion. Rhett had contacted a psychiatrist who specialized in dementia evaluations. He was preparing to have me assessed and declared mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. Once that happened, I would lose all legal standing, all control over my life and my finances. I would become a ward of the state, dependent on their charity and goodwill. Unless I acted first. I spent sleepless nights planning my counterattack. Every detail had to be perfect. Every piece of evidence had to be unassailable. I would get only one chance to expose the truth and reclaim my life. The family reunion would be my stage, the gathering where they planned to celebrate their prosperity, built on the foundation of my stolen life savings. I would give them a reunion they would never forget. My name is Rosalind Atticus. I am 78 years old. For 40 years, I taught mathematics at Jefferson High School in Richmond, Virginia. I raised 2 children as a single mother after my husband died in a car accident. I saved every penny I could. I invested wisely. I planned for my golden years. I never planned for my son to steal everything from me. Rhett was my firstborn, the child who held my hand during thunderstorms, the boy who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. He was brilliant, even as a toddler. Numbers came naturally to him. I would find him at age 5, arranging his blocks by size and color, creating patterns that amazed me. I pushed him toward excellence. Every report card, every test score, every achievement mattered. When he graduated summa cum laude from law school, I cried with pride. When he started his own practice, I was his first investor. $5,000 from my teacher's salary to help him rent office space. He paid me back within a year. With interest. That should have been my first warning. Rhett never did anything without calculating the return. But I saw only my successful son, the lawyer who drove a Mercedes and lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs, the man who married Scarlett, a woman who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. They had everything I never could afford to give him growing up. I was so proud. My first stroke happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I was grading papers when my left arm went numb. The pen fell from my fingers. I tried to stand and collapsed. The paramedics found me on my classroom floor, surrounded by half-finished equations. The hospital kept me for 2 weeks. Rhett visited every day. He brought flowers and magazines. He spoke to doctors and nurses with authority. He made decisions about my care with confidence I no longer possessed. My speech was slurred. My left side was weak. Simple tasks exhausted me. I felt like a burden to everyone around me. Rhett suggested the nursing home. Not permanently, he assured me. Just until I regained my strength. The facility was clean and comfortable. The staff was kind. I would have physical therapy and proper medical care. I agreed because I trusted him completely. The paperwork was overwhelming. Insurance forms, medical releases, financial authorizations. Rhett spread them across my hospital bed table and explained each document patiently. His lawyer training showed in how he organized everything, how he made complex legal language sound simple. The power of attorney was just one paper among many. He needed it, he said, to handle my bills while I recovered, to make sure my mortgage was paid and my investments were managed properly, to take care of me the way I had always taken care of him. I signed it without reading the fine print. I trusted him more than I trusted myself in that moment. The nursing home was everything he promised. Clean rooms, attentive staff, good food. I had a private room with a window that looked out onto a garden. I could see roses blooming in the spring sunshine. Other residents played cards in the common room. There were activities and visitors, and a sense of community I had not expected. I began to heal. Physical therapy strengthened my left side. Speech therapy cleared my words. Within 3 months, I was walking with just a cane. I was ready to go home. That was when Rhett started making excuses. My house needed repairs, he said. The stairs were too dangerous for someone recovering from a stroke. The neighborhood was changing, becoming unsafe. It would be better if I stayed at the facility a little longer, just until he could find me a more suitable place to live. I accepted his explanations because I wanted to believe them. But doubt crept in slowly. Phone calls to my bank went unanswered. Requests to see my account statements were deflected. When I asked Rhett directly about my finances, his answers became vague. Everything was fine, he assured me. He was handling everything. I should focus on my recovery and not worry about money. The first concrete evidence arrived in an envelope marked "Personal Effects." A nurse had cleaned out my house and brought me a box of important papers. Among them were old bank statements from before my stroke. I compared them to more recent statements I had finally managed to obtain. The numbers did not match. Accounts that once held hundreds of thousands of dollars now showed minimal balances. Investment portfolios I had built over decades had vanished. The savings account I had maintained for emergencies was empty. I sat in my wheelchair, staring at the papers, feeling the weight of betrayal settle into my bones. My son had not just taken my money. He had taken my security, my independence, my future. He had taken everything I had worked for and saved for my entire adult life. The house on Maple Street where I had raised him was sold. The cabin by the lake where we had spent summer vacations was sold. Even small investments and savings bonds were cashed out. Everything liquidated, everything gone. $1.2 million, a lifetime of careful saving and prudent investing. Gone. I called Rhett that evening, asked him to explain the missing money. His voice was calm, almost patronizing. I was confused, he said. The stroke had affected my memory. The accounts were fine. I should not worry about things I could not understand. When I pressed him for details, he became defensive, then angry. If I continued to make accusations, he said, he would have to consider other options for my care. Places that specialized in patients with dementia. Patients who could no longer manage their own affairs. The threat was clear. Stay quiet or lose what little control I had left. I hung up the phone and sat in the darkness of my room. listening to the sounds of the nursing home around me. Other residents watching television, nurses making their rounds, the ordinary sounds of institutional life. But inside my chest, something had changed. The grief was still there, sharp and deep. But alongside it, something else was growing, something patient and calculating and absolutely determined. They thought my stroke had weakened my mind, along with my body. They thought I was just a confused old woman who could be easily managed and quietly robbed. They had forgotten that I was a teacher, that I had spent 4 decades dealing with people who underestimated me, who thought they could deceive me, who believed they were smarter than I was. They had forgotten that I knew how to plan, how to wait, how to teach lessons that would never be forgotten.